Hi, it's Denise again. Today our video is going to be about how I found my breast cancer. Um, I was noticing that I was having some sharp pains on my left side of my breast. I wore underwire bra and it felt like the underwire was just sticking through and poking me, and 2 or 3 times I would take my bra off at the end of the day and try to see if there was a place where the wire had come through, and I wouldn't be able to find anything. And so that went on for a few weeks, and I was just always trying to readjust my bra or do something to make that. It was just a sharp stabbing type pain. And then a few weeks after that, I started to get some real sore, throbbing pain under my armpit and across the left side of my breast. And it felt like I had really pulled a muscle there, maybe lifting one of the grandchildren to put them in the car seat or carrying groceries or something. It just felt like I had a really sore muscle, and that went on for a couple of weeks. So I'm going to stop here to say that people will tell you that breast cancer doesn't hurt, and that is not true. For me, that was my very first indication that there was something wrong. I didn't think it was breast cancer because everyone had always said breast cancer doesn't hurt, but that did hurt. And so I just want to bring to your attention that if you feel something that's unusual and doesn't feel right and you can't explain it, don't ignore it. So a few weeks went by, and one day I was getting out of the shower, and I leaned over to put my hair in a towel, and when I raised back up, there was a mirror in front of me, and I noticed that the left side of my breast seemed flat. And I thought, well, that's really strange. And then I noticed a little mole on the bottom of my breast, and I thought, oh, I don't remember that mole being there. And I guess I was subconsciously maybe trying to figure out why I was having that pain. And I went to lift my breast up to look at the mole, and when I did, this whole area of my breast just collapsed in my hand. And I thought, well, that's really strange. But you know, I'm getting older, and I just thought, well, you know, maybe your body's just changing. So I did my right breast the same way, and it didn't collapse, and I thought, well, again, that's weird. So I went on a little bit longer, and a few more days went by, and I washed my hair again, and the next time when I leaned over, I raised up very slowly because I thought my towel was going to come off. And as I was raising up and I looked, I noticed that it looked like there was a dark line going from my nipple back to under my armpit. And again, you know, that got my attention. And so I started to really watch closely, and as the next couple of weeks went by, the dark line got darker, and then it wasn't long before my breast started to pull to the left. You could just tell when you leaned over that my breast was pulling to the left when you looked at it, and it was starting to get an indentation in it, so it looked like it had a dent in my breast. It wasn't round and smooth anymore like it had been. So then I started, you know, I went to the internet and I started to look for pictures of breast cancer to try to see, well, does this look like something that is breast cancer? And are there pictures here that look like my breast looks, or is this something entirely different? And I looked for 3 days. I looked at images of breast cancer images, drawings, diagrams, photographs, medical pictures from journals and books, and I could not find anything that looked like my breast did. And at the end of the 3rd day, one night, as I was changing to get ready for bed, I thought, well, I'm going to look a little bit more, and I clicked back on my images where I had left off, and I flipped through a few more pages, and I still didn't see anything, and I thought, well, there's not any pictures, so whatever it is, it's probably not cancer. And I just flipped my phone one more time to scroll down a little bit more, and when I did, down on the very bottom left-hand corner, there was a tiny little thumbnail picture, not very big at all, and it looked just like my breast. And that's when I knew I need to get to a doctor. So I went to my doctor, and it took me a couple of weeks to get in to see her. And it was hard for me to imagine that I could have breast cancer because I had had a mammogram every year. I had had 2 breast biopsies in the previous years, and they were both benign. And I was due for my mammogram for this year, so when I got in to see my doctor, she said, you know, this doesn't look like breast cancer to me, but we'll do a mammogram just to be sure. You're due for one anyway. So a few more weeks went by, and I went in and had the mammogram, and they didn't see anything. So they called me back in to do the 3D mammogram, and they did that. And then they decided they would do an ultrasound. So when they did the ultrasound, that's when they saw the cancer. And they told me I was going to need to come back in and have a biopsy. Now, biopsy is where you go in and they take a tissue sample of your breast, and then they send that to a lab to find out if it's got cancer cells in it or not. There are all kinds of different biopsies. There's needle biopsies, and there's biopsies where they actually surgically open you up and take part of your tissue out. And then there's biopsy where they use something a little bit larger than a needle. It looks kind of like a nail gun, and they go in and take lots of samples out. And I had had the needle biopsy twice, but I hadn't had the one where they use the thing that looks like the nail gun. And so when I came in to get the biopsy, they were taking several different samples of the breast tissue, and I was laying on my side, and they had the thing that takes the samples coming in from here. The doctor was standing over me, and there was a screen up here, like a big computer screen, and it was dark all over, and I had seen films of breast tissue that was suspicious before. And so I knew that normally when you have something like a calcification or a cancerous tissue, it shows up white on the screen. And he took several, probably 6 different samples, and I was lying there looking at the screen, and I could see each time he would put it in and take it out, but I never saw anything white on the screen. It was just all dark. And he asked me after several times if I was okay, and I said yes. They numbed my breast. I didn't feel any of it. And I said, but I do have a question. I said, I'm looking at this screen and I don't see what you're sampling, because he was just all over the place. And I said, I've seen these films before where they show cancerous tissue, and I don't see anything on here that looks like that. And he said, okay. He said, let me show you. And he pointed to the screen up in the top corner, and he said, see this white part up here right on the edge of the corner? And I said, yes. And he said, that's normal breast tissue. He said, the part I'm sampling is all this black tissue, and that was the whole screen. And so that kind of scared me a little bit. And so he finished taking the samples, and I put the ice packs in. You have to wear ice packs in your shirt. And at the same time, my son was having surgery, and so I was going with him to the hospital to have surgery and trying to help him take care of his children and waiting to find out if I had cancer or not. And on February the 15th, while I was driving down the road, they called and said, well, you have cancer, so you're going to need to come in and talk to the doctors and find out what the results of your biopsy says your care plan needs to be. So that's kind of how I found my cancer. And I'm going to place some pictures to try to show, in the pictures you'll see where there's a dark line across the left outer side of my breast. You'll be able to see where the indentation in my breast is. It looks like it's just a little bit darker, but that's actually an indentation there. And another picture that will show how the breast turns to the left compared to the right breast. So want to make sure that everybody can look at that and see it, so that if that is something that you're experiencing, you know that that is not normal and you do need to get to your doctor. And I would just urge you, just any time that you're uncomfortable with or don't understand something that's happening to your body, go get answers. Don't put it off, and if you don't get the answer that you feel like you need to get, if you're not certain or comfortable with what one doctor tells you, go to another one. I knew something was wrong, and so I just, want to say, no matter what people tell you, follow what your soul tells you, and believe in yourself. And until you get the right answers, because it's not worth dying over to just be polite and do what a doctor tells you to. You need to follow your own instincts that you have and be sensitive to yourself and take care of yourself. Also, I'm going to put at the bottom of this video some sites that you can go to that have some terms and definitions. There are a lot of terms and definitions that you will hear when talking about breast cancer that, if this is all new to you, are not going to be words you've heard before. And you need to go to some of these sites if you've just learned that you have cancer or that somebody you care for has breast cancer. You need to go to some of these sites and start looking up these words, terms, and definitions. There are so many different kinds of cancer. There are so many different stages. There are so many different treatments. And when you go in to find out about your biopsy and hear about your care plan, doctors are going to sit in front of you and use words that you have never heard before. And if you don't familiarize yourself with these terms, it's going to be really confusing. It's hard to sit there and listen to people talk to you about having cancer under the best circumstances, but it really complicates it when you don't even understand what they're telling you. So I strongly recommend that you go to some of the websites that I'm going to put down and look up terms and definitions of these words that relate to breast cancer, so that when you do speak to someone, you will understand what they're saying, because they will use medical terms and it won't occur to them that you might not know what they're talking about. So that's all I've got for today, and I'll look forward to our next video. Bye.